It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for our weekly discussion of the important legal and political issues of the day. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. You can send me a tweet at Mark Scaringi, and I'll read your tweet on the air. For all my columns, prior podcasts of the show, and a look at some great merchandise we have, check out the markscaringishow.com. And today we're broadcasting again on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. So if you are a friend or follower of Harrisburg 100, you can write your comment live, and we'll try to read it on the air and have a discussion. Well, today there's breaking news in my old hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Regrettably, a gunman opened fire inside a Pittsburgh synagogue just a few hours ago, killing multiple people and shooting three police officers before authorities were able to take the gunman in. Robert Bowers apparently is the name, and the news reports indicate that he went into the synagogue during a worship hour and shouted, "All Jews must die," as he opened fire. So this is a horrible and heinous and tragic event. Reports indicate there was an armed guard inside the synagogue who may have prevented additional casualties. But, of course, reports are coming in as we speak, and this situation will continue to develop, and we'll try to give you updates throughout the duration of our show today. President Trump, Governor Wolf, Attorney General Shapiro, and others have commented on the tragic shooting. I believe Governor Wolf is on his way there as we speak. The synagogue is the tree of life, and for my Pittsburgh friends, it's at the corner of Wilkins and Shady Avenues. It's just a block down the street from Beechwood Boulevard, where my family had a home for many years. Squirrel Hill is a beautiful section of Pittsburgh, and this is a predominantly Jewish section neighborhood. It's just a few minutes from downtown, and so our hearts go out and our prayers go out to the families of those who have been killed and harmed in this horrible event. There's a strong and vibrant Jewish community in that Squirrel Hill section. It's a beautiful and wonderful place, but today it's a very sad place because of this tragic shooting that has occurred. You know, our country is reeling from shootings and attempted bombings. The nation has been riveted by the unfolding story of the Florida person who apparently orchestrated and organized a mass attempt mail bombing through the mails. This Florida man was also recently apprehended, I believe yesterday, for orchestrating this mass attack. He had delivered through the U.S. mails this IED type bomb, if you will, to 13 prominent Democrats or liberals, Hollywood celebrities, George Soros, Tom Steyer, and others, significant contributors and donors to the Democratic Party and to liberal political organizations. The suspect is 56-year-old Cesar Altieri Savac Jr. of Aventura, Florida. The news reports here are just coming in. This man claims he is a Seminole Indian, although that is probably patently false, in that his former attorney was recently on CNN indicating that his mother and father are Italian and Filipino descent. It's very odd and strange. This suspect, Mr. Savak, is now charged with 5 federal crimes, including mailing an incendiary device and threatening a former president. Now, apparently, this man has a long criminal record, including being arrested at least 10 times, according to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And one arrest was back in 2002, and that was for making a bomb threat to the Florida Power and Light Company. Apparently, it had shut off his his power, and he responded by making a bomb threat. His most recent encounter with law enforcement was a 2015 probation violation. And this person, Mr. Savak, has been referred to by friends and family, those who associates of his, as somewhat of a gypsy, a former wannabe wrestler, also a former male stripper, and an individual who worked as a delivery man, as a bouncer and DJ in a strip club. He was caught at an AutoZone store, and apparently the FBI was able to trace him via his smartphone device to that AutoZone store, and that's where they apprehended him. Now, the media, of course, is blaming President Trump for this Florida bomb man, the man behind this orchestrated attempt to send some sort of incendiary device to prominent Democrats and liberals. The Associated Press has been running with the headline, "Trump denies he's at fault for the bomb suspect's actions. There's no blame." They mean to say Trump is to blame. CNN, in a segment entitled Reality Check, editorialized that neither party portrayed holds a monopoly on virtue and vice. But then it goes on to attack Trump and not Democrats for uncivil rhetoric. And in the story on CNN's Reality Check, they actually count and list the number of tweets in which Trump has said something critical about prominent Democrats, and then they tie these critical comments to the work of this madman. And I think that is indicative of where the media is today on this issue, and of course where they will be shortly on this horrible, heinous shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh, just hours ago. I was watching one of the reporters in the White House pool ask the president about the Florida bombing suspect, that if whether the president planned to tone down his partisan rhetoric at rallies, which his critics contend has deepened political divisions in the country. And Trump replied, I think I've been toned down. I could really tone it up. But if you analyze the question posed by the White House correspondent assumes Trump's rhetoric is to blame. Otherwise, why would the White House correspondent ask Trump if he's going to tone down his rhetoric? And notice the question also assumes as true the complaint by Trump's critics that it's Trump's rhetoric that has deepened political divisions in this country. Is that true? Is it Trump's rhetoric that has deepened political divisions in America? And is President Trump to blame for this mass attempted bombing by this madman out of Florida? Let me know what you think. Call into the Mark Scarinci Show here, 717-540-0580. We're going to take a brief commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
Now, more of Mark Scarinci on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scarinci Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about the important political and legal issues of the day. Our friends in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, are reeling from a horrible, heinous shooting that occurred at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill, where there is a report of multiple casualties, including 3 or 4 individuals who have been killed as a result. Governor Tom Wolf is on his way. President Trump is tweeting that the federal law enforcement is available and on the scene and working in conjunction with the Pittsburgh Police Department. We're also dealing with the recent arrest of this gentleman from Aventura, Florida, who apparently is behind this mass mailing of explosive devices, or what appear to be explosive devices, to prominent members of the Democratic Party leadership, Hollywood celebrities, and big donors to liberal advocacy organizations, George Soros, Tom Steyer, and others, and also former President Barack Obama, former Secretary of State, and former President Bill Clinton's home in Westchester County, apparently have also been targeted by these bombings. And, of course, the mainstream media is blaming Trump, President Trump, and his rhetoric for inciting this bombing attempt. My question to my listeners is that true? Is President Trump and his rhetoric to be blamed for what is happening across the country in Florida with these multiple bombing attempts and, of course, now in Pittsburgh with this horrible shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue? And we'll open up the phone lines in just a bit and take some calls. The number is 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. So call in and let me know what you think. You can also comment on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, and we'll read your comments on the air, and we'll engage with you via Twitter, Facebook, and live on the radio. And I was talking about how the White House correspondents, the pool of reporters that follow the president, have immediately jumped on the president, and they have apparently identified what has caused this Florida man to engage in these multiple bombing attempts. And the reporters believe it is the president's rhetoric that is inciting this type of violence or attempts at violence. And the media is nearly unison. Instead of actually covering the story involved in this alleged bombing, they're unison in focusing on blaming Trump. The media says that Trump rhetorically attacks these politicians, the media, Hollywood celebrities, and others, and that those rhetorical attacks trigger Trump's supporters to use violence. That is the narrative, that's the story being put out there by the media. The media and the Democrats, they want to apparently guilt Trump into throwing in the towel and giving up and no longer fighting back rhetorically at all of those on the left and the Democratic Party and in the media who are constantly rhetorically attacking and insulting the president. Well, let's open the phone lines and let's hear what our listeners think. Is President Trump to blame for these attempted bombings of 13 prominent Democrats, Hollywood activists, liberals, and others? So we'll talk to, looks like Whit from Camp Hill. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Is President Trump to blame?
No, I don't think so. It's just commies trying to put him down again as usual. But I had a question. A political-related question in conjunction with your advertising there, Mark. A political-related question, and then also a real estate-related question. Whichever you prefer, I'll ask you first.
Well, we'll take the political question, and we'll leave the legal questions maybe for on Monday at our law office. How about that?
Well, the other one was, like I said, it was a real estate-related question.
Well, let's hear the political question.
Okay, well, on the political question, in light of the fact that when we, us voters, vote for someone to represent our best interests to the state, and they misrepresent our interests and or they pass laws which are unconstitutional because they're not totally impartial to everyone throughout this state, and they pass these unconstitutional laws. I'll give you an example, such as tasers. From what I understand, the average citizen isn't allowed to have or use tasers in Pennsylvania, although it's perfectly okay for cops to use tasers to kill people. So that's an unconstitutional law. But my question is, whenever these legislators pass these unconstitutional laws that are not uniform, I want to find out under what title, or maybe I should contact the governor's office, but it might be under Title 42, where I can find out the responsibilities that an elected official, such as a state legislator, are required to comply with in accordance to their salary that I'm paying them for my taxes to represent me. Where can I find out their codes of responsibilities?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And Whit from Camp Hill, I thank you for calling. And
thank you.
Yes, thanks for calling. Interesting question. What is the code of responsibilities of our elected officials in Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg? And also, are they is it incumbent upon them? Are they responsible for passing into law only those laws that pass constitutional muster? And interestingly, all of the professions in Pennsylvania and across the state have codes of ethics, rules of professional responsibility that govern the conduct of those professionals, from architects to real estate agents, all the way across the board. However, our elected officials do not have such a code of ethics or professional responsibility. Could you imagine if they did? The number of complaints and citations, et cetera, on that. But now each House of Congress does have an ethics committee, and typically that is the last committee that any member of Congress wants to join and be a member of. But they are responsible for investigating themselves, and that's part of our constitutional structure. And of course, members of Congress have the power to remove fellow members through impeachment and other provisions set forth in the United States Constitution. So there are political offices and there are political officers. And so the Founding Fathers intended that they deal with themselves in a political way. And so there's not really a course of action for a citizen to take to attempt to remove an elected official from office, other than through the ballot box, through the power of the vote. So that is my attempt to answer that very interesting and specific question. And we're also trying to watch the news and give our listeners updates on the horrible shooting that occurred in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Assembly, and commenting on the media's reaction to this other horrible incident in which a man from Florida, apparently a Trump supporter, who in recent days was living out of his van that contained all kinds of Trump campaign slogans on the exterior and perhaps interior of the van. An individual who has been to some Trump rallies and I think the Trump inauguration as well. He is being held in custody right now by law enforcement and is the alleged perpetrator of this mass mailing bombing incident that some are referring to as a hoax, in that apparently these were not bombs. These are not real bombs capable of detonation. So that's an interesting aspect of this story, and we'll see how that develops. My concern is with the media and, of course, the left and the leadership of the Democratic Party. They're going to, of course, blame President Trump and his rhetoric for inciting these acts of violence in Florida through the bombing and the recent shooting of just a few hours ago in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the question to my listeners is President Trump's rhetoric to blame? The media certainly thinks it is. I'm interested to know what my listeners think. So call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. and we'll put you on the air, and we'll continue this discussion after we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show. Stay tuned.
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. We're talking about the mail bombing, the man in custody now in Florida, and also the horrible shooting over in Pittsburgh, in my hometown, in the Squirrel Hill section, where there was a tragic shooting just hours ago. A gunman went into the synagogue there at the Tree of Life, and for my Pittsburgh friends, that's right smack dab in the middle of Squirrel Hill, which is a strong and vibrant Jewish community. The section just minutes from downtown is a beautiful place, and I almost lived there when I nearly went to law school over there at the University of Pittsburgh, and it's just a great place to live and work and raise your family and worship God. But apparently not today, and it's a horrible and heinous shooting that occurred there. President Trump calling for the death penalty for the perpetrator of that horrible shooting in Pittsburgh. Governor Wolf is apparently on the way. Interestingly, Governor Wolf doesn't support carrying out the death penalty in Pennsylvania. President Trump calling for it. We'll see how that story develops. We're also talking about the mail bomber out in Florida there, who is now in custody. And we've got lots of calls, lots of callers on the lines, so I'm going to get to you all. I just want to make one or two points before we start taking the calls again. The Attorney General Jeff Sessions and FBI Director Christopher Wray gave a press conference on the mail bomber out of Florida. And they've charged him with 5 federal offenses and then stated that the maximum period of incarceration for these 5 charges is 48 years. And I thought, boy, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. That seems a little short to me. And in that press conference, Attorney General Sessions, within the first 20 or 23 seconds of that press conference, labeled this motivated by politics, political violence, is how Attorney General Jeff Sessions labeled this. And I just thought that was somewhat ironic, considering the shooting by James Hodgkinson, the man who went to the baseball field in Northern Virginia with the intent to kill as many Republican congressmen as he could. He had a list of 6 of them in his pocket. When he was shooting and trying to kill those members of Congress, he was shouting that he was doing this because of health care. And yet the FBI, in its initial statements, indicated it didn't know what the motive was. It was searching for the motive. But yet now the Florida bomber, the Attorney General of the United States, within the first 20 seconds of the press conference, he declares the motive basically a political violence, which the Attorney General condemns. I just thought the difference was interesting, ironic. Perhaps some of my listeners have their own thoughts on that. The other point that I wanted to make is that former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy noted if the mailed IED devices were functionally explosive, that would fall under the category of weapons of mass destruction, which carries much higher sentences upon conviction. So former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy seems to be making the point that the devices mailed to the 13 Democratic legislators, to Hollywood celebrities, liberal donors, Tom Steyer and George Soros, former President Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill and Hillary Clinton's house in Chappaqua. Apparently, this former federal prosecutor is saying the devices were not functionally explosive. And some are saying this lends credence to the arguments that this was just a hoax. This bombing via the mail was nothing more than a hoax. Some of our commenters on Harrisburg 100 are saying, Andy says this is another Democratic trick in their playbook to persuade voters. Judy agrees with the president. Now, I'm interested to hear what my listeners think about this, and we'll open up the phone lines. We'll take some calls. We have Richard from Mechanicsburg. Is President Trump responsible for the mail bombing incident that has occurred?
Absolutely not. we're all responsible for our own behavior. And until people get that through their head, I don't know what's going to go. And same with any situation. If somebody yells at me and I get upset and drive my car into a telephone pole, it's not their fault. It's mine. So anyway, your previous caller about the consequences for people who don't represent us well, tell them to look up the consequences for the violation for your oath of office, for one. Even with the swayed Google results, you'll be able to get the information there. And also look up quo warranto. 3 questions on a quo warranto. Any one of those, just one out of the 3 is all you need, and they get removed from office. Please don't ever take my word for it. I'm an old man with gray hair. Look it up yourself. Do your research.
Well, Richard, thanks.
Great show. Appreciate it.
Richard, thanks for calling. Do appreciate that. Richard is referring to the old quo warranto action, and he is correct to add that to the political debate. And when we have time, and when that becomes the topic, and maybe we'll have a topic, maybe we'll make that our topic for a future show. And I was actually in the Attorney General of Pennsylvania's office. I was executive assistant to Mike Fisher, who was our wonderful 2-term Attorney General in the 90s. And we did have a quo warranto action where we attempted to remove, and I think we removed him. I'll have to look into that, a state legislator. But that's a topic for another day. We'll take some other calls, but before I do so, I just want to also comment on what I thought was a fascinating interview on CNN of all networks. They had the lawyer for this male bomber, this Mr. Sayok. They had his family lawyer on, and this family lawyer had also previously represented Mr. Sayok, and many times apparently over the years. And the lawyer said about Sayok, the Florida male bomber, suspect, when I would say apples, he would say cardboard. So the lawyer, his former lawyer, is saying that he was mentally deficient significantly to that effect. And then he said this, and I thought that this was interesting, and I want to know what my listeners think about this. The family lawyer, the former lawyer of the suspected male bomber, said, "He never seems sophisticated enough to do anything like he's accused of. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there were others who helped prod or encourage him to do this, or that the bombs, in fact, were so crudely made they never could have worked. He didn't seem to have the intellectual capacity to plan a conspiracy like this, in my opinion." Now, those are the words of Mr. Savak's former attorney during an interview on CNN, where his former attorney is saying he doesn't have the intellectual capacity to plan a conspiracy like this. He wouldn't be surprised if there were others who helped prod or encourage him, and that he never, the bombs were so crudely made, they never would have worked. Is Savak's former attorney implying that Savak is a patsy, that Savak was put up to this? Remember, the former attorney for Savak says there may have been others who helped or prod or encourage him to do something that he didn't have the intellectual capacity to do himself. I think that's a remarkable comment from this man's former attorney. And I'd like to know what my listeners think. We've got time before the next commercial break. We'll take a call. Marie from Chester County, you're on the Mark Skirringy Show. Is President Trump responsible for the male bomber?
Hello?
Yes, Marie, you're on the Mark Skirringy Show.
Yes, I have 2 points to make. The first one is no, of course not. And I am disgusted with how people are oversimplifying everything to be President Trump's fault. Every night, every week, I watch shows like Criminal Minds and FBI and movies where there are bombings and things sent through the mail and all sorts of violence, and people seem to just forget all about that. Everything is Trump's fault. Before this, how women were treated is Trump's fault. Never mind Bill Cosby. Everything is Donald Trump's fault. And I think, and my second point is, one reason why is I force myself every day to get dressed and ready for work with the Today Show on, and that's a very benign show if you don't pay attention, but every single day they have a very negative story or two or three about President Trump on there, and then it will subtly continue with follow-up stories that will back up whatever point they make, and this country is brainwashed to hate him.
That they are. Marie from Chester County, I want to thank you for calling. I'm sorry, I've got to cut you a little bit short. I've got to take a commercial break. We'll be on right after this. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to The Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580. Thank you for enduring those Scaringi Law commercials. And I just wanted to make one point. We are, in our law firm, very much involved in representing gun owners and FFLs, make sure that they are in full compliance with the various federal and state firearms laws and regulations. We're down at the Appalachian Promotions right now in York, 9 to 5 today and 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock tomorrow. You can talk with our firearms attorney, Attorney Brian Caffrey, who is there on the scene, talking with firearms owners and FFLs about the myriad of federal and state firearms laws and regulations and how to maintain full compliance. And that's the interesting thing, is that so many of us who are advocates of the Second Amendment are very much involved in making sure that we are in full compliance with the law. It's the law breakers who violate our firearms, our gun laws, who are the ones who are causing so much pain and harm and hardship across the country. And we're talking about the tragic shooting at the Tree of Life Assembly, the synagogue in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, where there are reports that there are 3 or 4 fatalities. The gunman went into the synagogue there, shooting "All Jews must die." That's a horrible, heinous act. President Trump is calling for the death penalty. We'll see how that story unfolds. We're also talking about the mail bomber out of Florida, recently taken into custody. The person apparently or allegedly involved in mailing out all of these bombs to prominent Democratic leaders and liberal donors and Hollywood celebrities. Of course, the media are blaming Trump for the mail bomber. Hollywood liberals are also blaming Trump. They're blaming his rhetoric as inciting violence against the left. But let's just take a quick look down memory lane with some of Hollywood's leading celebrities and anti-Trumpers. Remember, it was Madonna who, at a public rally in Washington, D.C., just a few hundred yards from the White House itself, who declared to thousands of people in attendance that she had given a lot of thought to blowing up the White House. Remember, Kathy Griffin had herself photographed with the fake decapitated head of President Trump. Remember Robert De Niro, who has repeatedly said he wants to punch President Trump in the face. The actor Johnny Depp has publicly stated it's time to assassinate President Trump. And remember the play that was in Central Park in New York City, William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And in that play, they had an actor portraying Caesar strikingly resemble President Trump, and they did a mock assassination of President Trump, a.k.a. Julius Caesar, and the character Brutus shouting the chilling phrase, "Sic semper tyrannis," death always to tyrants, as he plunged his dagger into the heart of the actor portraying Donald Trump as Caesar. These are our Hollywood celebrities, actors and actresses. Democratic politicians as well. Bernie Sanders said Republican health care reform would kill Americans. Days after his follower James Hodgkinson allegedly tried to kill Republicans, and he shot Republican Congressman Steve Scalise because of Scalise and Republicans' opposition to Obamacare, the Sanders supporter is the perpetrator. Bernie Sanders urged his followers to act in an unprecedented way, to go big and fight back against Trump in every way. Soon after she lost the 2016 presidential election, Hillary Clinton declared she had joined the resistance and labeled the Republican Party as the death party whose health plan will kill people. United States Senator Bob Casey up for re-election, being challenged by Lou Barletta right now. Bob Casey said the Republican health care plan will hurt people. Republicans are coming for you. The left-wing senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, recently the woman who had claimed to be a member of the Cherokee Indians, and that was all recently exposed as a complete fabrication and fraud. She urged her followers to act in an unprecedented way and to stand up and fight back in every way that you can. Democratic Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said the repeal of the Affordable Care Act will lead to death, disability, and suffering among the American people. Those are just a few of the comments from Hollywood celebrities and the Democratic members of Congress, and yet they blame President Trump for his rhetoric as inciting violence, and namely the mail bomber out of Florida. And within, I'm sure, a few more minutes, President Trump will also be blamed for the heinous shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill. Let's open up the phone lines. We'll take some more calls. Is President Trump's rhetoric the cause of these recent mail bombings? Joe from Harrisburg, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hello. My name's Joe, and I'm very suspicious of this situation with the bombings. All those bombs were sent, and none of them went off. That doesn't make sense to me. At least one of them should have went off. But I'm suspicious that the Democrats would do anything to become elected and change all the programs and reverse everything that Trump has done. And they thought that there was going to be this blue wave, but it seems to be disappearing the last month or so. So I think the Democrats orchestrated this. It's a false flag. It's just it's too orchestrated. It happened so fast, and they caught the man so fast. And I understand that the banners on his old beat up truck were brand new Trump stickers. And he's from Florida. That hot Florida sun that fades those stickers right away. It's just too much of a coincidence.
Well, Joe from Harrisburg, thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views. And,
thank you, sir.
Yeah, and Joe from Harrisburg makes the interesting point, and that is this Mr. Savak, is he a patsy? I talked earlier about the CNN interview of his former attorney and the attorney who is now currently representing his family. And it's a remarkable interview where the family lawyer who had represented Savak many times over the years essentially said he lacks the intellectual capacity to plan a conspiracy like this, that the bombs were made so crudely that they never could have worked. And his former attorney is asking the question, were there others involved to help prod or encourage him to do this? I think a fascinating interview of his Mr. Savak's former attorney, and we'll see how that story continues to develop. But right now, we're dealing with the mainstream media going on a full attack of President Trump and condemning his rhetoric and saying that it is the cause, it's the blame for this fake bombing incident. And I'm sure it will also be blamed, President Trump will be blamed for this heinous shooting in Squirrel Hill, Pennsylvania. This is the standard operating procedure of the left in this country. And on Harrisburg 100, the comment is made that which is worse, a bomb hoax or actual politically motivated shooting? And Harrisburg 100, the commenter there is referring to the shooting by James Hodgkinson, which we've talked about, where he is a Bernie Sanders supporter, was apparently violently angry that Republicans were attempting to reform health insurance laws in our country, went to the baseball field in Northern Virginia with a list of Republican congressmen in his pocket whom he intended to kill. And that is actual left-wing political violence that Republicans have endured, and that is in contradistinction to this alleged fake mail bombing, what very well could be a hoax out of Florida. But we'll see how these stories develop. I want to thank you for listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. Remember, this is your place on the dial.